Hey, everyone, and welcome to this deep dive into On Liberty by John Stuart Mill. We're going to be looking at how his ideas, especially this thing called the harm principle, can help us
Yeah.
think about, individual rights and stuff in our modern world, the
Uh,
digital age and all that. I think you'll find it's super relevant to a lot of the debates happening today around censorship and privacy.
Hmm.
So to kick things off, I'd love to hear your take on Mill's harm principle. Had you heard of this idea before we got into this?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, it's kind of the central idea in On Liberty. It basically says that society can only restrict individual freedom if it's to prevent harm to other people, not to protect people from themselves or to enforce any particular moral code.
Oh, that's interesting. So not don't do this because it's bad for you,
Yeah.
but more like don't do this because you might hurt someone else. Do you think people back then when Mill was writing this, like in the 1800s,
Yeah.
were they like, whoa, this is a crazy idea?
Oh, absolutely. It was like a total radical idea back then because a lot of people believed that it was totally fine for society to kind of dictate what was morally right or wrong, even if it didn't directly harm anyone else.
It makes you wonder what kind of harms they were worried about back then. That might seem strange to us now.
Totally. Think about blasphemy laws, which basically punished people for saying things considered offensive to religion, or, all the social norms that restricted women's lives,
Hmm.
all in the name of protecting them.
Right. So Mill is saying, hey, these restrictions are actually harmful.
Exactly, because they stifle, individual development and societal progress.
And I remember reading that he had this term for what happens when the majority gets to decide what's acceptable for everyone.
You're thinking of the tyranny of the majority.
Yes.
He was super concerned about that. Even in a democracy, where people have a say and all, the majority could still pressure people to conform to their views.
Even without explicit laws.
Right. It's like this subtle force field, making it hard to be different, to stand out, or even just to think for yourself if your ideas go against the grain.
And this leads right into another big thing Mill talks about, free speech.
Absolutely.
For him, it wasn't just about being nice or tolerant. It was this crucial thing for finding truth and allowing society to make progress. But how did he justify protecting even the opinions that we might find offensive or just plain wrong? Did he really believe that there was something valuable in even harmful ideas?
He did, and it's definitely one of his most challenging arguments. He used this metaphor, the marketplace of ideas.
Oh, yeah, I remember that one.
It's like picturing this bustling marketplace, but instead of goods and services, it's full of opinions, beliefs, perspectives.
I love that. So we're not just shopping for the best price, we're evaluating ideas, seeing which ones hold up, which ones get debated and refined. It's like this back and forth. That helps us get closer to the truth.
Exactly. And Mill argued that suppressing any opinion, even one that seems harmful, assumes that we're infallible, that we already know the absolute truth for sure, and history shows us that's a dangerous assumption.
Didn't he use some really big examples from history to kind of prove his point?
Oh, for sure. Think about Socrates or
Yeah.
Jesus, both condemned for their beliefs because they challenged the norms of their time.
So he's saying, if we silence these dissenting voices, it actually holds back intellectual and social progress.
Right.
Because who knows, maybe that crazy idea today turns out to be the breakthrough of tomorrow. But in today's world, the digital age and all, this free speech debate gets even more tricky. It's not just governments censoring things anymore. We have social media platforms, algorithms, a whole online mob mentality thing.
Absolutely. And that's where Mill's ideas become even more relevant, I think. He saw the potential for social pressure to shut down dissent, and the digital world amplifies that in ways he couldn't have imagined.
Right. It's like everyone's watching everyone else,
Yeah.
trying to craft this perfect online persona. And the pressure to conform is huge.
It is. It can be really hard to speak your mind when you feel like you're constantly being judged. Or worse, ready to be canceled for having the wrong opinion.
Like that saying, the nail that sticks out gets hammered down.
Right.
But Mill would probably say, hey, wait a minute, maybe that nail is holding something really important together.
Exactly. He believed that individuality, that willingness to be different, to think for yourself, was essential for personal growth and for society as a whole.
So it's not just about letting people be weird for the sake of being weird. It's about recognizing that those weird ideas, those people who think outside the box, they're often the ones who push us forward.
Yeah. Mill believed that diversity of thought and action was crucial for progress. And not just societal progress either. He saw individuality as key to personal happiness and fulfillment as well.
Oh, so if we're always pressured to fit in, to follow the crowd, it's not just bad for society, it's actually bad for our own well-being.
That's right. Mill argued that true happiness comes from developing your own unique talents, pursuing your own path in life, not just blindly following everyone else. He was worried that too much social pressure to conform would lead to a kind of collective mediocrity, where everyone's just going through the motions, living lives that aren't truly their own.
So it's like we're trading our authentic selves for a sense of belonging, but we lose something essential in the process. I wonder how this plays out in the digital world, where we're constantly bombarded with these images of perfect lives, ideal bodies, the pressure to present a certain version of ourselves online.
Yeah, social media can be a double-edged sword. On one hand, it gives people a platform to express themselves and to connect with others. But on the other hand, it can create this immense pressure to conform, to fit in with the latest trends, to present this carefully crafted image of yourself to the world.
Right, like everyone's in this imaginary popularity contest,
Yeah.
and they're losing sight of what truly matters to them.
I think Mill would say, we need to be careful not to let what I call the tyranny of the digital majority dictate who we are and what we believe. We should use these platforms to express our authentic selves, even if that means being a little different, a little weird.
It's about remembering that it's okay to stand out, to challenge the norm, to be that nail that refuses to be hammered down.
Exactly. Now, you might be thinking, after hearing all this about freedom and individuality, that Mill was some radical libertarian who thought all rules were bad. But that's not quite true.
Yeah, there were definitely limits to his love of liberty. He recognized that absolute freedom for everyone could lead to chaos and harm. So where did he draw the line? When did he think it was okay for society to step in and restrict individual choices?
Well, he acknowledged some exceptions to the harm principle, situations where societal intervention might be needed. For example, he believed in the need for basic competency.
Basic competence.
Yeah. He was talking about the ability to make rational decisions. He argued that people who aren't capable of that yet, like children, or those with mental incapacities, they might need some level of protection or guidance.
So not about taking away their freedom for no reason, but about making sure they have the support they need to develop the ability to exercise their liberty responsibly.
Right. It's about providing guidance and support, rather than just imposing restrictions.
What about situations where someone's actions, even if they're not directly harming anyone else, could have like bigger consequences for society? Did Mill have anything to say about that?
He did. He acknowledged that there might be times when some limited government intervention is needed for things like public health, education, or infrastructure, where individual actions might not be enough to ensure the well-being of everyone.
So even a strong advocate for individual liberty like Mill recognized that there are times when we need to act collectively for the common good.
Exactly. But he was very careful about government intervention. He believed it should be limited to cases where there's a clear and obvious need, and where individual action probably won't be effective. It's about finding that balance between individual freedom and collective responsibility.
And of course, we can't forget his views on things like inciting violence or direct harm. Even with free speech, there's some lines you just don't cross.
For sure. Mill recognized that speech that directly incites violence or threatens people's safety could be limited. He made a distinction between expressing an opinion, even a really radical one, and directly calling for harmful actions.
Like shouting fire in a crowded theater, your words have real consequences.
Right. It's about understanding that freedom of speech comes with responsibilities, and that there are limits when your speech is likely to cause harm.
Okay, so we've covered a lot. Mill's harm principle, his defense of free speech, his focus on individuality, and even the limits he saw to freedom. So what does all this mean for us today? Navigating this crazy digital world, what can we take away from Mill's work and apply to our own lives?
That's the big question, isn't it? I think Mill's work gives us a framework for thinking about these issues. It reminds us that individual liberty is precious, and we should defend it. But it's not absolute. And there are times when some restrictions might be justified.
Like he's giving us a new way to look at these digital dilemmas, to ask those tough questions, and not just settle for easy answers. He's telling us to think critically, to challenge what we think we know, and to be cautious of the tyranny of the majority. And maybe even something new, the tyranny of the digital majority.
Yeah, I like that. The tyranny of the digital majority. It really captures how social pressure shows up online, often in these subtle, sneaky ways.
Yeah. It's so easy to get caught up in the tide of online opinions, to feel like we have to conform, or to silence people we disagree with.
And Mill's work reminds us to push back against those urges, to engage in thoughtful debate, to consider different views, and to value individuality and dissent, even when it's uncomfortable.
Like you're saying, don't be a sheep, think for yourself.
Yeah, basically. And remember, thinking for yourself doesn't mean shutting out other opinions. It means engaging with them critically, weighing the different arguments, and coming to your own conclusion.
It's about being an active participant in that marketplace of ideas, not just passively consuming whatever's trending on Twitter.
Right, and it's about having the courage to share your own views, even when they're not popular, as long as you're doing it responsibly and without wanting to cause harm.
So as we wrap up this deep dive into On Liberty, I want to leave our listeners with a question to think about. We've talked a lot about the challenges of keeping individual liberty alive in the digital age.
Yeah, this digital landscape presents both unique opportunities and challenges when it comes to free speech, privacy, and individuality.
Okay, so here's the question. In a world of algorithms and echo chambers, how can we make sure we have a lively marketplace of ideas? A marketplace that encourages real intellectual and personal growth.
Wow, that's a great question. I think Mel himself would have struggled with that one if he were alive today.
Right. It's like we need a digital renaissance or something, where we rediscover the values Mill talked about. Reason individuality. A willingness to have open and honest discussions, even when it's tough.
That's a good way to put it.
It's like a call to action for all of us. Not to just consume information, but to really engage with it, to look for diverse perspectives, and to add our own unique voices to the conversation.
Totally. We need to be aware of those filter bubbles we create, both online and offline. It's so easy to surround ourselves with people who agree with us, but that doesn't challenge us to grow or to really understand how complicated the world is.
We need those moments of friction, where someone presents an idea that makes us go, wait a minute, I never thought about it like that before.
Exactly. Those are the moments that spark real learning and growth. And I think Mill would say, it's not enough to just tolerate different opinions. We need to actively search them out, to engage with them honestly, even if it makes us feel uncomfortable.
Like we need to become intellectual explorers, venturing outside our comfort zones, to find new ideas, new ways of thinking, new ways of being in the world.
I like that. And remember, exploration has risks. You might run into ideas that challenge your core beliefs, that make you question everything you thought you knew. But that's part of the journey.
It's about embracing that uncertainty, that feeling of not knowing all the answers, and being open to the fact that we could be wrong. It's humbling, but ultimately that's how we grow.
And I think that's where Mill's emphasis on individuality comes full circle. If we're all afraid to be wrong, to stand out, to express our unique views, then the marketplace of ideas just dies.
It's like we're all just echoing the same tired slogans, repeating the same talking points without ever really grappling with the issues.
Right. But when we embrace our individuality, when we're willing to be vulnerable, to admit we don't have all the answers, that's when the magic happens. That's when the marketplace of ideas comes alive. And we start to see real progress, individually and collectively.
So, let's all make a pact right here. Let's promise to be those intellectual explorers, to venture out of our comfort zones, to engage with different perspectives, and to share our own unique views. Who knows what amazing things we might discover along the way.
I'm in. I bet Mill would be cheering us on from the sidelines, encouraging us to embrace this messy, challenging, but ultimately rewarding journey of individual and collective growth.
Well said. Thanks for joining us for this deep dive into On Liberty by John Stuart Mill. We hope you've gained some new insights and have some things to think about. And remember, like Mill said, the search for truth and individual liberty is a journey, not a destination. So keep those minds curious and keep those conversations going.
Until next time.
Take care.
Yeah, it's like we need a digital renaissance to rediscover those values that Mill was talking about, you know? Reason, individuality.
Right.
Being willing to have open and honest discussions, even when they're difficult.
Yeah, exactly. It's like a call to action for all of us, to not just take in information, but to really engage with it, to look for different viewpoints, and to contribute our own unique thoughts to the conversation.
Totally. And we need to be aware of the filter bubbles we create, both online and in real life. You know, it's so easy to surround ourselves with people who agree with us, but that doesn't challenge us to grow or to really understand how complex the world is.
We need those moments where someone says something that makes us stop and think, I never considered it that way before.
Exactly. Those are the moments that spark real learning and growth. And I think Mill would argue that it's not enough to just tolerate different opinions. We need to actively seek them out, to engage with them sincerely, even if it makes us uncomfortable.
It's like we need to become these intellectual adventurers, going outside our comfort zones, discover new ideas, new ways of thinking, new ways of being in the world.
I like that. It's like an expedition. And remember, exploration always involves risk. You might encounter ideas that challenge your core beliefs, make you question everything you thought you knew,
Oh yeah, for sure.
but that's all part of the journey.
Right. It's about being okay with that uncertainty, that feeling of not having all the answers, and accepting that we could be wrong. It can
Exactly.
be humbling. But in the end, that's how we learn and grow.
I think that's where Mill's emphasis on individuality comes full circle. If we're all afraid to be wrong, afraid to stand out, afraid to share our unique views, then the marketplace of ideas becomes stale and lifeless.
Yeah, it's like we're all just repeating the same old slogans,
Yeah.
regurgitating talking points,
Yeah.
without really engaging with the issues in a meaningful way.
Exactly. But when we embrace our individuality, when we allow ourselves to be vulnerable, to admit we don't know everything, that's when things get interesting. That's when the marketplace of ideas comes alive. And that's when we start to see real progress, both as individuals and as a society.
So, let's make a commitment right now. Let's all be those intellectual explorers. Let's step outside our comfort zones. Let's engage with different viewpoints, and let's share our own unique perspectives. Who knows what we might discover along the way?
I'm in. I have a feeling Mel would be right there with us, encouraging us to embrace the messiness, the challenges, and ultimately the rewards of this journey of growth, both individually and together.
Well said. Thank you for joining us for this deep dive into On Liberty by John Stuart Mill. We hope this has given you some new insights and something to ponder. And remember, as Mill himself might say, the pursuit of truth and individual freedom, it's an ongoing journey, not a final destination. So stay curious and keep those conversations going.
Until next time.
Take care.
It's like we need a digital renaissance to rediscover those values. Mia
Yeah.
was talking about, reason, individuality, being willing to have those open and honest discussions, even when it's hard.
Yeah, totally. It's like a call to action for all of us to not just consume information, but to engage with it, to seek out different viewpoints and contribute our own unique thoughts and ideas to the conversation.
Exactly. And, we have to be mindful of those filter bubbles we create both online and offline. It's so easy to surround ourselves with people who agree with us, but that doesn't really challenge us to grow or help us understand how complex the world really is.
We need those moments of friction, those times when someone presents an idea that makes us pause and think, huh, I never thought of it that way before.
Exactly. Those are the moments that spark real learning and growth. And I think Mill would say it's not enough to just tolerate different opinions. We need to actively seek them out, engage with them in a genuine way, even if it makes us feel a bit uncomfortable.
Yeah, it's like we need to become intellectual explorers,
Yeah.
going beyond our comfort zones to discover new ideas, new ways of thinking, new ways of being in the world.
I love that analogy. And remember, exploration involves risk. You might come across ideas that challenge your deeply held beliefs, make you question everything you thought you knew.
Oh yeah, for sure.
But that's all part of the journey.
Right, it's about being okay with that uncertainty, that feeling of not having all the answers and accepting that we could be wrong. It can be humbling, Right. but ultimately that's how we grow.
And I think that's where Mill's emphasis on individuality comes full circle. If we're all afraid to be wrong, to stand out, to share our unique perspectives, then the marketplace of ideas becomes stagnant and lifeless.
It's like we're all just repeating the same old slogans, regurgitating talking points, without really engaging with the issues in a meaningful way.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But when we embrace our individuality, when we allow ourselves to be vulnerable, to admit that we don't have all the answers, that's when things start to get really interesting. That's when the marketplace of ideas comes alive, and that's when we begin to see genuine progress, both as individuals and as a society.
Okay, so let's make a commitment right now. Let's all be those intellectual explorers. Let's step outside our comfort zones. Let's engage with different viewpoints. And let's share our own unique perspectives. Who knows what we might discover along the way?
I'm in, and I have a feeling that Mill would be right there with us, cheering us on, encouraging us to embrace the messiness, the challenges, and ultimately the rewards of this journey of growth, both individually and collectively.
Well said. Thanks for joining us for this deep dive into On Liberty by John Stuart Mill. We hope this has provided you with some new insights and given you something to think about. And remember, as Mill himself might say, the pursuit of truth and individual freedom is an ongoing journey, not a final destination. So stay curious and keep those conversations going.
Until next time.
Take care, everyone.